You both keep thinking of each other at the same time, and this means something you didn't search for them. You weren't trying to remember them, but somehow they showed up in your mind again. And here's the part that feels almost strange. It happens randomly, in the middle of your day, while you're driving, before you fall asleep, out of nowhere. And you can't help but wonder, what if they're thinking about me too? This isn't about fantasy. This isn't about obsession. This is about something far more subtle and far more powerful. Because psychology research suggests that when two people form a strong emotional imprint on each other, their minds tend to revisit that bond at similar emotional states. Not because of magic, but because emotional memory is triggered by internal shifts. And those shifts often mirror each other. And here's where it gets interesting. When two people share unfinished emotional energy, their thoughts don't disappear just because communication stops. Silence doesn't erase attachment. Distance doesn't cancel impact. Time doesn't automatically close emotional loops. You've felt that, haven't you? You can go days without contact. You can tell yourself you're moving on. You can distract yourself with work, friends, new routines. But then, something small happens. A song, a smell, a quiet moment. And suddenly, they're there again. But here's the twist. The reason this feels mutual isn't because you're desperate. It's because emotionally significant connections create what behavior experts call reciprocal cognitive activation. In simple terms, when one of you feels the emotional echo, the other often does too, especially if the connection ended without clarity. Unfinished emotions don't fade cleanly. They stay open. And open emotional loops keep both minds quietly circling back. That's why sometimes you think about them, and hours later they text. Or you dream about them. And the next day, you randomly hear their name. It's not mystical. It's emotional synchronization. Studies on attachment patterns show that when two people share a strong bond, especially one that ended with confusion or silence, their nervous systems remain attuned to each other longer than they expect, even in no contact. And this is where most people misunderstand what's happening. You think, if they cared, they would reach out. But thinking about someone and acting on it are two completely different psychological processes. People suppress contact for many reasons. Pride, fear, timing, ego, uncertainty. But suppression does not equal absence. In fact, the more someone tries not to think about you, the more intrusive the thoughts can become. Because emotionally charged memories don't dissolve on command. Here's the deeper layer most people miss. When two people think about each other at the same time, it's often triggered by emotional states, not logic. Loneliness, nostalgia, personal growth, stress, moments of achievement. When something significant happens in your life, your brain searches for the person who once felt emotionally important. And if you are doing that, there's a high chance they are too. Not constantly, not obsessively, but quietly. And that quiet is powerful. Because real attachment isn't loud. It's subtle. It sits beneath the surface. It doesn't scream for attention. It just exists. This is why silence can feel heavier than arguments. When you both stop talking, but neither of you truly detaches, the bond shifts from visible to invisible. And invisible bonds are often the strongest. You might try to convince yourself it was one-sided. You might tell yourself, it's just me. But here's something psychology research consistently shows. Mutual emotional intensity rarely happens alone. If you felt it deeply, it's highly likely they did too. People mirror emotional investment more often than they admit. They just don't always show it. And here's where it gets even more interesting. When two people are emotionally aligned but separated by timing, they often experience what feels like energetic pull during periods of personal change. Meaning, when you start healing, when you start improving, and when you start letting go, they feel it. Not because they're watching you, but because emotional detachment shifts internal patterns. When you emotionally release someone, the dynamic changes, and often, that's when they resurface. Have you noticed that? The moment you begin to genuinely focus on yourself, they reappear. That's not coincidence. That's attachment recalibration. Behavior experts notice that when one person emotionally withdraws, the other subconsciously senses the shift and feels a loss of connection. And that loss activates memory. Memory activates thought. Thought sometimes activates contact. But here's the part you need to understand clearly. Thinking about each other doesn't automatically mean you are meant to be together forever. It means the connection mattered. It means something was real. It means the emotional imprint hasn't dissolved. And that's important, because most connections don't leave this kind of residue. Most people fade, but some people, they linger. And when someone lingers in your mind repeatedly without force, it tells you the attachment was layered, not surface level. Now let me ask you something honestly. When you think about them, is it anger? Or is it curiosity? Is it resentment? Or is it longing? Your emotional response tells you what the connection actually was. If it's peaceful but heavy, that's unresolved attachment. If it's chaotic and dramatic, that's trauma bonding. If it's warm and grounded, that's genuine emotional compatibility. And this is where clarity begins. Because mutual thinking is only meaningful if the foundation was healthy. Two people can miss each other deeply and still not be aligned long-term. And here's the quiet truth. Sometimes you both think about each other at the same time because your story isn't fully closed yet. Not necessarily because it's forever, but because something remains unsaid, unhealed, unfinished. And unfinished connections have a way of circling back until clarity is reached. That clarity might look like reunion, or it might look like closure, but it will look like something, because emotional loops demand resolution. And this is where your power returns. Instead of asking, "Are they thinking about me?" Ask yourself, if they are, what does that change? Does it change your standards? Does it change your growth? Does it change your self-respect? Because mutual thoughts don't equal mutual effort. And mutual effort is what creates real relationships. Still, don't dismiss what you feel. If the connection was deep, if the timing was complicated, if silence came before understanding, then yes, there is a real possibility that when you feel that sudden wave of memory, they feel it too. Not every time, not perfectly synchronized, but often enough to matter. And here's the final truth most people don't talk about. When two people think about each other at the same time, it's usually because they experienced something emotionally rare. And rare things don't disappear easily. So if someone keeps entering your mind without force, don't panic. Don't romanticize. Don't chase. Just observe. Because the meaning isn't always about them. Sometimes it's about what that connection awakened in you. And if it's meant to evolve, life has a way of reopening doors naturally. If it's meant to close, clarity will arrive gently. Either way, your awareness is the sign that you're emotionally conscious, and that matters more than any coincidence. If this resonated with you, comment below. Have you ever experienced thinking about someone, and then they suddenly reached out? Subscribe for more insights into the psychology of hidden feelings, silence, and emotional connections.